friends. This weekend we're visiting my family and I'm in my aunt's beautiful kitchen. And I'm treating everybody to these soft farmer's cheese cookies. Not only are these cookies so soft and tender, but they also have tons of flaky layers in between. So it's almost like puff pastry, but so much easier to make from scratch. Let me show you how to make them. The dough has just a few simple ingredients. I have all-purpose flour in the bowl here, and I'm going to add just a little bit of salt. Salt actually makes baked goods even better, so I always add it. And then I also have farmer's cheese, some butter, some egg yolks, and water, and that's it. I'm using farmer's cheese, and we call it tvorog in Russian. And you can find this in some stores. I also have a recipe for how you can make it yourself on my website. We have it in most of our local grocery stores. But if you can't find it, you can also use cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is more wet, so you can drain it over a colander and even like blot it dry with some paper towels to soak up the excess moisture, because if you can see, this has like a really dry texture, and that is what we need for the cookies. Otherwise it's gonna be too wet when you mix up the dough. I actually put the butter in the freezer for a little while so it got really cold, and now I'm gonna use this grater and grate the cold butter into the flour. And this is a little trick for making the butter like have flakes of butter in throughout the batter. And as I'm grating it, I'm mixing it up with the flour to coat the butter. And this will have these pieces of butter throughout the dough. And when they bake, the butter will melt, create pockets of air, and that is what's gonna make the pastry have all those layers in between. So that's why it really helps if you can have really cold butter, work quickly, and coat the butter with flour as you're grating it so that it all doesn't melt into the dough. So now we're going to add the farmer's cheese to the cookie batter. Just use your hands to work the farmer's cheese into the batter, but don't work too slowly so your warm hands melt the flakes of butter. You want the butter and the farmer's cheese to be evenly mixed into the flour, and that looks about right. Lastly, we're going to add 2 egg yolks and water. I'm just going to mix them together first a little bit and pour it into the batter. Just mix it until it comes together into a ball and form it into a disc shape. As soon as most of the flour is incorporated, just form it into like a disc and it's done. Now we're going to wrap it up in either parchment paper or wax paper, just like this. The cookie dough needs to chill for at least an hour before you start rolling it out, and you're not going to be able to roll it out. It's going to be a giant mess on your counter if you don't chill it, so this is important. You can do this up to a day or 2 in advance and just keep it in your fridge until you're ready to bake it. And you can even freeze this cookie dough, which is awesome. So you can just keep it in your fridge for a few months and then just take it out when you're ready to bake it. If you're going to freeze the cookie dough, then wrap it in several layers of parchment paper and then put it into a Ziploc bag, because this will make sure that it doesn't absorb any odors from the freezer, if you know what I mean. So this way it'll stay nice and fresh and delicious. When the cookie dough is nice and cold, use some flour and sprinkle it on your counter and roll out the dough. I like to cut the dough in half or even into quarters so that I'm working only with part of it at a time, and the rest I put in the refrigerator so it stays nice and cold. If the dough stands at room temperature too long, then the butter is going to melt and your cookies are not going to puff up and create flakes when they're baking in the oven. They're going to be flat and they won't have any of that nice flaky texture that we want. So keep the rest of it that you're not rolling out in the refrigerator. So this is half of the dough. So as you can see, you need to roll it out pretty thinly, and you can do half of this and it's going to be easier to work with. But make sure to keep the rest of it cold in the refrigerator. That way the butter doesn't melt and you'll get nice puffy cookies. And we're going to cut out circles using a cup or a biscuit cutter or anything like that. And this is a perfect job for your little ones to help you with. I have this bowl of sugar in here, and I'm gonna take the cut out piece of dough, dip it upside down right into the sugar and pat it in so that it adheres to the dough. And then fold it in half. Dip it in the sugar again. Fold it in half again. And dip it in sugar. And keep repeating this with all of the cookies. Make sure you put the cookies sugar side up on the cookie sheet, or the sugar is going to burn as it's baking because the temperature is pretty high and it's not going to be the best situation. Save the scraps of the cookies and put them back in the refrigerator so they chill. And you can roll them out again and make more cookies out of them. They're not going to puff up as much as the first batch, but they're still going to be plenty delicious. Roll it back up into a ball and refrigerator until it gets cold again. Put the cookies on an ungreased cookie sheet and place them in the preheated oven to bake. Press down on the cookies slightly before putting them into the oven. That way they're not going to open up when they're baking. Preheat the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit and bake the cookies for 20 to 25 minutes until they're golden brown and puffy. This is another of my mom's recipes that she has been making since she was a little girl, and I just love these recipes that have been tested through time and have been loved through the generations because they're the best. And these cookies, they're not too sweet, they're simple, but they're so good. I hope you give them a try.